Okay, so guys, welcome again. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. And just a reminder, so we don't all step on each other. I mean, I love this interaction. I don't know another class that really has so much interaction, which is great. Use your reaction button on Zoom to put up your hand. Meanwhile, I'm going to mute everybody. Put up your hand when you want to speak. Okay. So I'll probably have to repeat what I'm going to say. I'm going to give a little, where are we in the Tanya, right? So the first thing we learned, I've got like three things in my mind to say that we learned. One, that the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe told us the Tanya is not like any other book. This book is a Yechidus Klali, a general Yechidus for every Jew. It's instructions for every Jew in how to live life. It's addressed to everybody. It's a Yechidus Klalis, a general one-on-one with the Alter Rebbe. That's number one. Number two, the book is going to focus on the Beinani, in between, the in-between state. We're going to answer between what and how to navigate that intermediate space, right? So number one, the book is, he tells us, is a Yechida Klalis. It's for every single Jew. It's Yechidus Klali. It's a general Yechidus with the Rebbe. And number two, it's a book that's going to focus on the in-between space, the Beinani, in between what and what is the in-between, what is the space in between, and how to navigate. As one of my sons calls it, it's a training manual for the Beinani. He calls it BIT, Beinani in training. So it's addressed to us as Beinani in training. And three-thirds we got up to, the first lesson that we got up to in chapter 1 is that we have two souls. One, which he says, Metzad HaKlippus, is Metzad, it's a soul which is invested in and mislabs into which the klippos are invested, which is important to know that there's a difference between the animal soul and the Yetzer Hara. Even though in many Maimorim and other places you'll find them identified. There is an identification, but they're not a singularity. There's the Yetzer Hara, which encloses itself, invests itself in the animal soul. But because it's invested that way, it can be disinvested as well. So important thing to keep in mind as we go along. And we learned that there is an animal soul in everyone. And the next point is the point we're going to start today about the second soul. He told us there are two souls. Nefesh Hasheni is the second soul, the godly soul. And one of the reasons it's the second soul, because it's in terms of time, temporality, it's the soul which comes in gradually and later. The first soul, the animal soul, is Miloshin from the language of animus. It gives us life. So first we have life. And then the quality of life is enhanced, not only enhanced, but it reaches its epitome through the gradual investment of the godly soul, which mostly culminates at the time of bar or bat mitzvah. All right, so that's where we're going. But now that you're all here, we'll do Yom Yom first. 24 Kislev. We're continuing the explanation of the Shabbos, introducing, feeling the closeness of Shabbos on Wednesday, on the fourth day of the week. And it's all based, I'm looking now in the Siddur, the last pasuk in the Tillim for that day is L'chuna ranu l'Hashem, Nori l'tzur Sheinlo, which is the same pasuk that we begin the Shabbos davening with. So he begins by saying a middle-level explanation, not just a simple meaning, but some inner meaning geared to the average person of these three verses, beginning L'chuna ranu, is as follows. On Wednesday, that's the day we say that kapitel, when one begins to think, where am I going to get my Shabbos needs, both in the literal sense and also with what am I going to spiritually make Shabbos, right? It's interesting in itself. How I'm going to make Shabbos. How am I going to make Shabbos? Where's my food coming from? But how am I going to invest myself in this Shabbos? I'm thinking about that already on Wednesday. After all, every person is quite different on Shabbos than on a weekday. So one becomes a little bit despondent. Where am I getting my Shabbos needs for? Both the physical and the spiritual. Where are they going to come from? The solution is Lahu Naranan. Let us sing. Have faith. Have trust. Sing. Start with Simcha, right? Simcha goes through everything. So come Thursday, it's now closer to Shabbos, and we still have nothing. It doesn't seem to Naranana. We're not singing so easily. And we realize we have to do something. So what do? We study Hasidus Thursday night, so that by Friday we sense the depth of what it says later. It says, Ki Kel Godel Havaya, that God is great. So we come to that entrance now into Shabbos with an infusion of the energy of God is great. And with this, a Jew can, it's interesting how he says, he can admit them shavti, a yid. And he turns Shabbos into a verb. And with this, a Jew can Shabbos. I can fly. I can be Shabbos. I can be in Shabbos. So that's Hayom Yom. Okay, put that aside. Tanya today in lessons in Tanya.
Are you saying, 1 minute, are you saying that the Tilim of the Yom for after Shabbos is Rananuta?
Yeah, that's the end of it. On Wednesday.
Oh,
the last pasuk.
Oh, okay.
It's a brief. Why does that end with it? That's his whole deal. Why does the Wednesday Tilim end with that? Because Shabbos is getting its brucha from the Shabbos. That Wednesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is getting blessed from the Shabbos before. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is already getting the ha'ora of the Shabbos is coming in. So on Wednesday, we start Shabbosing. That's his verb. We got to start Shabbosing on Wednesday. But we have to gradually get into that Shabbos spirit. Yeah. So lessons in Tanya, page 47, chapter 2. Okay, and very briefly, 1, 2, 3. We've learned already, number one, that this book is not like any other book. It's a Yechidus Klali for every single Jew in Yechidus with the Rebbe. Number two, the focus of the book is on the Beinani, the in-between state, middle person. And we're going to in between what and how to navigate that space. It's a training manual for us. It's a training manual to become a Beinani. And number three, in the first lesson in chapter 1, we learned something which is going to be pivotal in terms of navigating this space and coming into the Beinani space, which is that there are two souls. One, the animating soul, Mitzad HaKlippas, that's his language. And the other, we're starting now, Perek Beis. Okay, again, raise your hand if you have something to say. And I mean, if you just burst forth, it's all right too, but I just don't want people to be stepping on each other. Okay, Perek Beis. The Nefesh HaShenis B'Yisrael, the second soul, and the second because, as I said earlier, it comes in later, it comes in after the Nefesh HaBahamis. First, we're just alive, right? The embryo gets gestated, or comes together, gets gestated, and that animus, that pure biological animation comes first, then comes the second soul. Yichelek elaka memal mamish. This is, of course, a language that most of us have heard over and over again. Its source is in the Zohar, and also quoted by Chaim Batal in his writings. And it's derived from the following. Kosov is written in Bereshis. And God blew a soul of life, not the animating soul, but the soul which is from the Chaya Chaya, which is from the life of lives. And what it says about that, you blew it into me. And the Zohar says on this, one who blows from deep down within him. Pirish, which means, the Alter Rebbe explained, from his innermost places, his depths, that the innermost part of the person's depths is not from the the simple animation that the person is alive, but that the person is invested from the Chaya Chayim, from the life of life, which is God himself, which is Maitzi b'nefichosoi b'koyach, which blows out, just like the breath blows out from us, b'koyach, it's, quote, blown out from Hashem with a tremendous power and sucked into us, so to speak. The Nefesh Hashemis, the godly soul. But now to understand this, well, where does it come from? It blows, right? That establishes it comes from some depth. Excuse me. What is the depth? The Jewish souls rose up in his thought, or rise up in his thought. And one thing to know is that throughout Hasidus, this expression "rose up in his thought" is attached. It comes from the Olah. It comes from the highest levels of God's thought. It's not just his thought, but it's his aliyah, his highest elevation of thought. That's where the soul comes from, the godly soul. Kislev, as is written, B'nei b'chayre Yisrael. You, the children, are my firstborn, my chosen ones. You're the chosen, the b'chayre. You're the bikurim, like the first fruits. Banim atem la'Hashem elokechem. You are children to Hashem, your God. Pirish, which means what? I mean, you could just take it easily. Every human being is a child of God, right? Nothing, and then nothing that that exists is not from God. But what's it mean? So like this, just like a child is drawn from the brain of the father, the spiritual origin of the seminal drop, that's where it takes place in the brain, a transfusion from spiritual to physical. It becomes a seminal drop that starts in the brain, where it doesn't yet have any visibility, but that's where the process starts. So just like the child is drawn from the brain of the father, as kaviyachol, so similarly, if you could say such a thing, it's a metaphor. Neshamas kol Yisrael, the souls of all Jewish people, they're drawn from God's thought, and where in God's thought? See, machshava is a garment of the soul, and usually when we speak about machshava in Chassidus, it's speaking about the origin of articulation. Articulate first in our inner speech, which is brain, but that inner speech in brain has a source, which has a source, which has a source. And the source is in Chokhmah Elah, the highest levels of reaches of God's manifest brain is in Chokhmah. As it says in the Zohar, that you are wise, but not with a known Chokhmah. So the godly soul comes from a level which is Chokhmah, but a level of Chokhmah which is not known or knowable, the source of Chokhmah. As it says in other Pasuk, Chokhmah ma'ayin timotzah. Chokhmah comes from the ayin. So leaving apart for the moment a discussion of what the ayin is, from that level which is intrinsically godly before any kind of differentiation, that's where the godly soul comes from. The highest levels, the highest levels of God's thought, not just the lower articulative levels of thought. And in that place, that level, we say that he and his wisdom are one. Much because of a Rambam, as the Rambam writes, and we'll do this Hagah on the side. The men of the wise people of the Kabbalah admitted to the Rambam, what the Rambam says. And even according to the Rizal, all the Kabbalah agrees with what the Rambam says. Yetziva milza beside his slapchis orein sof. There's this thing I'm about to say stands as a foundation, a fundamental, in the enclosement of the orein sof Baruch Hu, al yidei tzimtzumim rabim, through many, many contractions, the kelim, Chabad of Atzilus, in Chabad of Atzilus first, but not higher. Higher than Atzilus, the Rambam says, we'll look at higher than Atzilus, above Chokmah Allah, as an ayin that doesn't yet have any enclosement. The enclosement starts in Atzilus. It's written in another place that what? That the Ein Sof itself is much, much higher than Chochmah Bina or Das. To the extent that the existence of Chabad, even Chabad of Atzilus, Chochmah Bina of Atzilus, is considered like physical existence in relation to the ayin, the state of godliness, Ein Sof, before any tzimtzum. So it's considered like physical existence as slave by God Himself. As is written, a pasuk, Kulam b'chokmah sisa, it's in Tillim, and the simple meaning is he was smart. He made everything wisely, but we darshan it to say the highest levels of God's wisdom is already like something physical compared to the essence of God, which is beyond that. And the shama of an nefesh elokis comes from beyond that, from the place higher than, as I said earlier, deeper than any articulation, deeper than any simsum, deeper than any covering. Now, about that place, which is a chachma shalai yadiyah, a chachma that's not knowable or not known, it says about that place and about the entity who has that place, which is God Himself. Shehu Hamada, this is Lashon of the Rambam. Shehu Hamada, Bahu Hayadua, Bahu Adeya. He is the knowledge, He is the knower, and He is the thing known. Yadua. It's not written there. He is the Yadua. He's the knowledge, the knower, and the thing known. And this is not something that any human can really understand clearly. The Kislev, as is written, if you search after God, will you find Him? Ukasiv is also written, my thoughts are not your thoughts. So when we say, again, it's a level of, we call it thought because it's mind, but it's mind at a deeper level. How many deepers I can say, then, and that's where the nefesh elokis comes from. Even though there are tens upon tens of thousands of levels of neshamas, one higher than the other, the ein kates without any end. Right? We have the avos and the imois. We have Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom. And they, of course, are souls which are much higher than al neshamas deresenu ela, than the souls of this generation, which this generation we call akvei mashiach, the heels of Mashiach, shehem bechinas agvayim. They're the heels relative to those souls, mamish. Lagabi hamoyach v'haroish, just like the heel is at the bottom compared to the head. So there are souls, exalted souls, much higher than other souls, which are called the feet, to them, which are called the head. And also in each and every generation, in any generation, there are the heads of the thousands of the Jewish people. These souls are souls which are the level of head, umoyach, and brain, in relation to the soul of the average people and the simple people. And even souls, in terms of looking at the anatomy of a soul, the soul itself has a higher level and a lower level. They call nefesh, kolula min nefesh, ruach min neshama. Each soul has three levels: neshama, ruach, and nefesh, or vice versa, nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The kol mokim, nevertheless, with all those variations, varieties of souls and levels where souls come from, shorish kol hanefesh ruach neshama kulam reish kol hamadregas atsev kol hamadargin. All those levels of three levels of the souls, from the head to toe, down to the end, all the levels, Amalubish Beguf Ami Ha'oretz, which are enclosed even in a simple person, the Kal Shebakalim, and even a person who's, Kal Shebakalim really refers to one who doesn't take the mitzvahs so seriously, but he can be doing still all the mitzvahs. He's certainly not doing them by chumrah, but he's Kal Shebakalim. But it's various flavors. Is he someone who's not observing mitzvahs, or someone mitzvahs just observes mitzvahs in a light way? But in any case, that aside, so that we see there are various levels of adhesion, so to speak, to the Torah. So all those souls, no matter what level they are, nimshach mamoich ha'elyon, come from the, quote, supernal brain, shehi chochma elah, kavyahu, which is God's wisdom. If you could say such a thing, calling it even wisdom, because his wisdom is not like our wisdom. His thoughts are not like our wisdom. And this is kamashal ben hanimshach mamoich ha'av. This is like we compare it to a son who comes from the physicalization of the seminal drop in the father. Even the toenails of a person come from this exalted, high place. The seminal drop, even before it becomes physicalized, is the source of even the toenails of a person. Through, of course, the gestation and development in the womb of the mother, which finally gives rise to the toenails. So this is an example of, in a physical way, of the descent from one level to another, so that the highest level of spirituality gets transformed into this low toenail. And nevertheless, with all this, the toenail is still, and every part of the body is getting its life, its vitality. The toenail grows only because there's an active brain. So this is a mashal for everything, no matter how low a person, how simple a person, the fact that the person is there in any respect is because she has to have a connection with the essential life force, with the mahus v'atzmus ha'orishan, with its original essence, which in our metaphor is the seminal drop from the father. And even now, when the embryo is outside the womb and walking as a second person, a son, a child, as I said, the toenail is getting its life from the brain. As is brought in the Gemara Nida, there in the Gemara it says the white stuff is which is the white stuff, the loivin. Loivin again is the color where all colors are included with each other, so there's no color. But from that no color come all colors. So similarly, from the seminal drop of semen, or that's a metaphor for that point of seminal point of singularity where there's no multiplicity whatsoever, comes all the details. So similarly, the white part, comes the tendons, v'atzomas, and the bones, v'tzipornayim, and the toenails. But as is also written in Eitz Chaim, Shar Achach Shmol, the Soid Labushim Shel Adam Harishon, in speaking about the secret of the garment of Adam Harishon, the Gan Eden. Kabbalah says that the toenails of Adam Harishon, this is even before there's Adam and Chava, but the first encapsulation of humanity or instantiation of humanity, but the Zohar, excuse me, the Eitz Chaim from the Rizal, excuse me, Eitz Chaim Moshe Kadovera says that these toenails are from Moyach Tavuna, from the understanding part of the brain. In other words, in the deepest part of the soul. And so it is, if we can say such a thing and apply this metaphor, where it comes to the root of all nefesh, ruach, and neshama, those three levels of the entirety of everybody in Klal Yisrael, it comes from a place, Lamaila, very high, and comes down. Madrega comes down from one level to another. Through the chain of descent of worlds. Abiyah, from Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. B'chachmasa is born from the seminal drop, from the seminal point, which is God's wisdom. Deceive kulam b'chachmasi. So we brought up that everything, no matter how low it is has in it something of the origin from whence it came. Now, in the origin itself, there are levels. And the level we're speaking of and focusing and tend to focus on more specifically is that particular level, which is the source of the Jewish nefesh elokis. And from that source level comes into being the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. Anybody, even no matter how low a level a person is at. No matter how low a level a person is at, simple a person may be, uneducated, uninitiated in the Torah and mitzvahs, etc., etc. That person and that person's soul is always. This is why, the Rebbe always says that, that there's no such thing as a Jew who's far away because of this. Because no matter how, quote, far away you may be, your soul is kashuras imiyuchedis beyichud neflo ve'otzim b'mahusim ve'atzmusim harisha. Your soul is tied, united, in a wondrous unity and a strong unity in the essence in its original essence. Shehi hamshachas hachma elor, which the drawing down of that essence comes through the first point of contact, hachma elor. Because the way that the neshama, the soul of even the Am Haaretz, literally sucks life, gets an infusion of life force, of godliness in its being, comes through the tzaddikim, the hachomim, and the wise ones, who are called Rosh B'nai Yisrael Shebadayram. That's back to his point, that just as there is the godly soul in everybody. That godly soul in everybody is invested in people at different levels of exposure, and also the souls come from different roots. Even though in general we're all calling Helak, but they come from deeper and deeper, or less deep and less deeper roots, right? And there's a connection, and all souls are connected. And the entry point of that connection in the world at any particular time are the tzaddikim and the gedolim and the chachamim, who are called Rosh B'nai Yisrael of that particular generation. And from this we will understand Maimon Rizal, what the sages have said. It's Gemara on the pasuk Uladavka boy. It's a pasuk in Devorim. You should cling to him. Shekol hadavik v'talmidei chachamim. Anyone who clings to a person who is wise in Torah, and gets close to that person, the Torah attributes that as if you're clinging to the Shekhinah itself. Why? Because inside of all of us is a ha'ora of the Shekhinah, right? That's the Malchus, which is within us. That's the Moshe Rabbeinu, which is within us. That's the Mashiach, which is within us. But everyone has it at different levels, essentially, and in terms of how much exposure it has. So when you come together with someone who's a Talmid Chochem or a Tzaddik and unite with him, you're uniting at a deeper level of Shekhinah, because his level of exposure or a root source from where that soul is a deeper level. So it's as if you're uniting with the Shekhinah Mamash. Because through clinging to the Talmidei Chachamim, the ones who are immersed in the wisdom of the Torah, then the soul and the spirit, nefesh, the three level nefesh, ruach, and neshama of even a simple person, is clinging into and united with its original source, which is in Chachma Allah, the supernal Chachma, and we say about God himself that he and his Chachma are one. As the Rambam says, he is the knower, the known, the knowledge, and the thing known. So what he's done here is saying there's a whole chain upward. This is as a chain downwards, is chain upward. No matter how far away you may be, and no one is ever far. Let's say, no matter how covered over to whatever small or great extent your connection with Hashem is, when you connect with Talmidei Chacham, when you connect with the Rebbe, when you connect with the Tzaddik, when you connect with the Torah, Hu v'cham Masa is one. He and God's wisdom are one. So you're connecting all the way up to the singular point of God himself. And on the other side, those who separate out from the Talmidei Chachamim. So then, where are their souls getting? Where are they sucking from? Where are they getting their life force from? It's all coming from Hashem. There is no other place. So where else could it be coming from? If the person is chosen to take a path on the other side, where are they getting their life from? They're getting it from the same place, but they're getting it from Bechinas Acharayim, the other side. Right? There's the Panim and Acher, face and behind. So God himself is capable and does, and not only does, he makes it a big deal of this, of emitting his light and hiding his light. The two things that he does. He carries the opposites. He carries light and he carries darkness. They're just two sides of the same thing. So Panim is the light and Acharayim is the backside. And when a person manifests behaviors which are not aligned with Torah, he is aligned with God all the time. No one is ever apart from Hashem, but it's from the backside of the Nefesh Ruach and the Neshama of the Talmidei Chachamim. And it's written in Zohar and in Zohar Chodesh, another section of Zohar, Sha'ikar told you Kaddish Atzmei B'Shas Tashmis. Which side is going to be the dominant side? The root of that, although it can be changed all the time as a person lives and develops, the root of that is the extent at which the parents are Mekadesh themselves at the time of developing, of having the relationship, the Zivuk. B'shas tashmish, dafka. Mashein ken b'nei ami ha'aretz, which is not the case, the simple people of the earth. Behind mishum she'ein l'cho nefesh ruach neshama she'ein lo lavush b'nefesh atzmis aviv. Since every soul, that he puts in negative, since there is no soul that doesn't get a garment to the soul from the parents, so a lot depends on the parents. Not just the education that the parents give them, but whether they sanctify themselves at the time of Zivug. And it's through the garment, right? The garment, your thought, your speech, your action, that you're going to perform the mitzvahs. So if you get a very refined garment, a garment where Kedusha can shine through your parents, their behaviors, but he's not here emphasizing the behaviors. He's emphasizing particularly whether they Mekadesh themselves at the time of Zivug. So that will depend on the quality of the garment that you get. And the person does mitzvahs through his garments, his thought, speech, and deed. So even the flow that you get, the quality of the flow that you get from God, either panim or acher, or somewhere in between, or mix, or more panim and less acher, that whole flow, which comes from heaven, hakol is al yidei levush zeh. Everything comes through this garment. In other words, there's an essence of God, which is plain and simple. But that essence itself exposes a duality which is no contradiction within it, but becomes manifest as two different sides, the side of Kedusha and the side of the opposite side of Kedusha. And through that, the opposite side of Kedusha is more and more garment, more and more concealment, more and more layers of concealment. So it's through that garment, no matter how refined or not refined, no matter how thick or thin, meaning translucent or blocking, so everybody gets some kind of garment when you're born. The fact that you're physical and you don't have a immediate awareness with your visual eyes of the godly, that itself is a garment that's covering over. So through this garment, the quality of the garment will be the quality of the extent to which one is naturally drawn to Kedusha or has to work more at being drawn. Whether if your quality of garment is somewhat from the side of Acher, the other side, so it's a bit harder work to get back to the panim, to get back to the face. And if the parents have Mekadesh themselves, Yamshich levush kodesh b'neshama b'nei, then they will draw down a holy garment to the child. V'efilu hi neshama gedela, and even if the soul of the parent is a great soul, tzricha lekiddush atz avad, it needs the kiddush, it needs the sanctification. Aval haneshama asma, but the point of all this is, even though souls get clouded over, souls have different origins. Even they're all helak elakah, right? And since they're all helak elakah, then aval neshama atzma, the neshama itself, you should know that even a person who manifests him or herself at a low level, and we're talking, he could be like kicking in the face of God, he's not believing anything at all in the Torah. You should know that even that person is someone who has a soul which is a helak elakah memal, and therefore can never be separated. Essentially, it's just this, whatever separation that person has is only superficial. There's a Arizal, right? Called Zebel L'Kutei Torah. He writes all this in the Arizal's L'Kutei Torah, Parshas Vayera, Ubetame Mitzvahs, over there, Parshas Bereshis. As again, the Alter Rebbe humbly says, all I'm doing is collecting sayings from other places. I'm not telling you anything you didn't know, except you didn't know it. But now you'll know it. Okay, that's the Helek of Tanya for today. Questions, comments? Ubechein. And so what? Some people dive off at this point. But we still got many. Anything? Well, I'll say one thing. No matter where you're holding, it's always possible to, and you have within you, and I have within me, I'm talking to myself, the ability to get even closer. Whatever distance, no, there is no distance that separates really. There's only a distance which is a function of how I'm positioning myself. And that I have a free choice. My free choice is all about that. Whether I'm going to position myself in a manner of being buried, God forbid, under the darkness, or whether I'm going to pare away the darkness and reveal the light which is always there. The Chelak Elakah V'Mal Mamash. Anybody else?
Yeah, as you say, we all have the same source. And if you really want to, I think there's the positive way of looking at it is that we're all equally distant from the Atzmut. We're all, the distance, the difference between a tzaddik and a Rasha in this world is very small in a sense, right, compared to the Atzmut of Elokus.
Beautiful.
So,
absolutely.
Not to judge.
Right. Not to judge.
The example is Avram was born by Terah, right? We say that the Pesach Seder. We all came a long way. And there's more to go.
And more to go. Okay. Anybody else before we say adios? All right. Till we meet again tomorrow. Bye-bye.